Hi, everyone. Just to double check if everyone can hear me, if you can, if someone can let me know in the comments if everything is okay, is good. Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming to the workshop. As some of you know, my name is Sonia, and I will be doing today a master class on 3D modeling in Blender. Today we're going to learn about the fundamentals, a little bit about the industry. I'm going to try that the class is half a little bit of a lecture, and then at the end I'm going to be doing a demo in Blender. It's going to be a little bit basic, just with the idea that whoever who joins today is kind of the first time they open the program, and they can go through it and learn. And then with the workshop the school is making that I will be hosting, we will go more in depth. And the idea is that you can go through the learning process of making pieces for your own portfolio. So just as an introduction of myself, my name is Sonia Gutierrez. I'm from Bogota, Colombia. I was born and raised there. And then I moved in, I think, 2016 to Toronto to study animation. I went to Maximod, or MNT now, and I graduated from their animation diploma in 2020. After I finished the program, I went to Humber College to do their 3D modeling and VFX program. It's only a year, but it was a great program to learn the fundamentals of special effects and the industry. And then after I graduated in 2021, I've been mainly working as a 3D freelance artist. I have done a couple of stuff. I mainly like and enjoy working for indie projects. I can, and I will show you a little bit of my portfolio so you have an idea of what I do. This is my current portfolio. So as you can see, I like doing very cartoony stuff, stylized environments, and props for games. Yeah, I can show you a little bit. I have some of my 2D stuff that I did on my time of Maxima. This film over here, Seasons, was my third year film in the animation program. And then these two over here were part of my 4-year film. I mainly use Maya for these projects too. And then this espresso coffee shop was for this was for Humber. And then I did it, and then I wasn't too happy with the results, so I took an extra 6 months to redo it from scratch. But as you can see, I focus a lot in 2D, toon shading, which will be this cartooning style with very flat light, almost only 3 values. You have your midtones, your lights, and your darks. But if you see the grayscale of it, everything is on 3D. And this was how this guy looks in a 3D rotation. Then some of the texture work. And then this is the original concept done by Derek Lafon. He's an amazing artist. You probably have seen some of his stuff around. And yeah, I fell in love with this, and I was like, I have to do it in 3D. But I really wanted to show this one because it really shows what you can do with 3D and how can you blend something like a 2D concept and make it into 3D. Then I've been working for a Space Flux, which is an indie game. It's available in Steam. It's done by a friend. And I have helping with some props and some characters. And then I was working in another game called Trick or Treat, which is also another indie project that is non-funded. So I don't know when it's going to come to life and be released outside. It might take a couple of years. But I really like the design of the characters It's very cartoony. It's very fun. I'm gonna show you. This is the Frankenstein. Is my favorite one from all of them, just because he has like that funny face, but you can see how he will look like on his wireframe. And this is the concept. So, oh, sorry, I have a dog in the house. But as you can see, something that you have to take into account when you were working in 3D modeling is that whether it's a client or like a studio or like you're working for something, you're most often be handed like a 2D concept that someone else did. And your job as a 3D artist is to make that object or character to the closest version on 3D, and to make it like the most appealing, but also the closest to the concept, because someone I already spent like a crazy amount of time developing that concept, and it was probably already went through a process of corrections and green light. It could happen where like maybe you have a problem while you're modeling and you have to go back to the person and be like, hey, I'm having these problems. We might have to change something. Like, you know, the jacket is clipping, or like when you finish your model and then give it to another person to rig it, then that person might say like, the topology is not enough. I need something else. Can you fix it? So it's kind of like a collaborative environment where like to do one thing, like one character, you have like multiple people working on it and touching at the same time. So that's really fun for me. Just like how much it takes to bring something to life and to be functional for like maybe a video game or for like an animation project. It has to go through like a lot of steps before even someone can animate it or like, you know, like just post it, like finish it in their social media. So it's a bit time consuming, but I think it's very rewarding at the end of the day. So that being said, I'm gonna focus on like what's 3D modeling. I see it like a 3D dimensional representation of a concept or an object. As I was saying, most of times you will get a concept done by someone, like a character, or like sometimes props for an environment. And then you just have to bring that into the program and make it as close as possible. So if you see it that way, you're kind of like drawing on 3D. When you draw like an illustration or like a 2D image, you usually are drawing in only 2 axes, you know, like it's a flat image that works in 2 dimensions. The second you add the 3rd axis, you're adding depth to the object. And then in that sense, you can see all the angles of the object, and then you can see all the faces of the object. So that's how like a simple square goes to a cube and transform into that. You can use 3D modeling to create characters, environments for like animation video games, for illustration purposes too. But that's not like the only limitations. I think like often most of like 3D artists want to work like within the animation or like the video game industry because it's like the most fun of all of them. But you can do 3D modeling for product design. You can get into advertising, especially too if you want to get in architecture. You're gonna work on 3D. You're gonna learn how to make buildings and cities and like, you know, rooms in 3D like maybe to preview like a building apartment that they're making, or sometimes for like a city development. You know, if they want to see how a street is going to look like, how a parking lot, how can they make a parking lot fit somewhere at a building, they most often build all those things in 3D first, do like a preview, and then they adjust things based on that. And then those type of projects get approved, and then they become something in real life. So those are like all like different avenues that you can look into 3D. I like to see like 3D art as a tool or like a skill that you can develop. You don't necessarily need a career in 3D, but I think it's like an interesting skill that you can learn and then you can later apply in other aspects of your life. So you have 3D printing, you have like people sometimes commission characters for like their games, for like D&D, for tabletop games, and you can make money out of that. You can sell assets on, right now I think it's on real market, or like I think it used to be a Sketchfab that you could like make a 3D model and sell it for like a couple bucks, like, but that's like an avenue to make an income out of your art that I think is worth exploring. And it doesn't immediately relate to like be working with a studio. You can also be a freelance artist as myself and work like in different projects and different clients to accomplish something. So I'm going to talk a little bit of like all the amazing things you can do with 3D. A couple concepts that I want to touch before we move forward, because I already talked a little bit about them, but I don't want you to be lost, is this is a mesh. When I refer to a mesh in a 3D modeling, we're referring to the structure of the character or the prop. You can call it like a wireframe, but it's like these lines that like this kind of grid that makes your 3D modeling happen. When you see it solid and without like the lines, it's just like a flat shading that makes a model. But inside, you need a structure that holds that model. So when you refer to the mesh, you refer to that. And then when you refer to your topology, you're referring to like these guys over here that are really important. Is you have your vertex, which is like a point, just a single point that you can manipulate. 2 points will make an edge, which is this line over here. And then a minimum of 3 points right here will make a face, which is like a flat surface that you can also manipulate, and it will be like facing the camera. And then sometimes I will be talking about normals, and normal is what tells your face what direction is facing. If it's like gray or white and is facing the camera, you're going to look at like this. If it's not facing the camera, you're going to look at like black, and usually that's when you have like some problems. So that's something good to have. Usually in the industry, you use triangles and quads. If you are working for animation, most of the time you're going to be using quads. If you're working for video games, you're mostly going to be working on triangles or in quads. It all depends on like what you're doing, and if your prop is very close to the camera and it needs to have like a lot of details, or if it's like in the back of the room and you can't see it, it has like probably a very simple mesh and it can be done with triangles. And then you have like n-gons. N-gon is anything that has more than 5 sides. It can have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever amount of vertex they have. Usually you want to avoid those. That's very important for you to know from the beginning when you get into 3D art, is that you want to avoid n-gons to all costs, because they don't deform well when you want to rig a character, and they can create problems when you're trying to texture or to apply lighting. They're not good. So most of the time you want to avoid them. That being said, I'm going to show you like a couple of trees. I think trees are a good example of what you can do with 3D, because, hopefully if you go outside, you have like an idea of what a tree looks like in real life, but also shows the range of what you can do. Like an example, this guy is a very realistic tree. You can see like the individual leaves. Actually, I think I was looking more at what this person did, I think this is a 3D scan actually. So they went outside, took like a bunch of pictures, like a 360 rotation of the tree, and then bring it into a program and make it look like as real as possible. So you have some video games that most of their stuff is 3D scans. Either is the environment or sometimes the characters, and then they later do like what they call mocap animation. If you have seen like the behind the scenes of Avatar, that the people has like this crazy like black dogs in their faces with the suits, and they're like acting, but then that acting is reflect on a model in like a program, and then someone comes and cleans that and make it like beautiful and like finish for like the movie. That's like a similar way of like they made this tree. Is they went, took pictures, and then they brought it into the program and finalized it inside the program, and then they took it and rendered it in Unreal Engine, which is like a game engine, where and then they can use it for like an asset for a video game. They can multiply this tree and make like thousands of them and make a whole forest for a game. These are more examples of trees, but you can see that you can get like very realistic results while you're working. Or then you can do something like this, which is like you have like an illustrative concept, something like very cartoony. This looks like out of a children's book. And then you're like, I want to make that in 3D. And, you know, you have like the possibilities. There is some sculpting involved in this. And you can see that the mesh is a little bit complex. And as I was mentioning, this asset is probably done for an animation project. So they're mainly using quads. You can see that all their mesh has quads. And this will make that then when someone else comes and paints this tree to make it look like this, it's going to look really nice and very cohesive to what they did in the concept. So not only you can go like a very realistic, like photorealism style, but you can go like completely opposite and go into cartooning. And like that's kind of like the range you have when you create 3D art. Another common example is, you know, when Toy Story first was released in, I think like 1995, 3D used to look like this, and it was very time consuming to make, and it was kind of difficult, and it was very limited. As the years have passed, it's been almost 30 years since the first movie. You can clearly see how far the industry has come into developing new technologies, new workflows, and new programs to like make the same character. So you can clearly see the way the light shines here in the head, the reflections of the face, like the backlight on the hair, like how good it can get. And that was only like on 30 years. So that opens like the possibility to do so many things. And with time, I think like 3D has become very accessible. An example of that is Blender, which is an open source program. And then it can do so much in like so many of the steps of the industry that we will talk later. You can do them inside Blender. So technically you can make your own, like now in 2024, almost 2025, you can do your own Woody in Blender and render it and make it look exactly like this. So it opens the possibility to create art like in your house or with a small team. So that really opens the avenue for a lot of like indie projects, like video games or like animation projects. Because before, when you used to need like a very expensive computer or like a large amount of people to develop something. Now you have those tools in your house, hopefully. but yeah, this is a great example of like how good 3D has gone. And then if you, I think another good example is Moana from Disney. They have to develop new tools and new technology to do the water animation. Same for Tangle. They have to develop new technology to do the hair for Rapunzel. And like the more time it passes, more like technology is developed. And I think like every movie that either Pixar or Disney makes, they have like new challenges that they want to resolve, of course. So they will just find a way to do that. So an example of that is the water. So they were like, we need to simulate water in 3D. How can we do that? And then they would develop new tools. So by the second movie, it's less time consuming and it's easier for them to make it on 3D and render it and make it into a final movie. Other examples of what you can do in 3D, I think like Arcane and Spider-Verse, I'm going to show you a picture later from Spider-Verse, are good examples of like blending 2D and 3D together, where you have like some of the assets are painted by hand, like in Photoshop, and then they're used later on a 3D program. And you can see clearly, like in Arcane, they got very popular for that style. But also that means that in the last couple of years, we have developed more workflows to accomplish different things. I think for like a long time, we were stuck a little bit on the Disney era of like Rapunzel. I think the movie came out in 2010. And then since then, all the movies, both from like major studios and like other 3D stuff that we have seen in the theaters, is very similar. Everyone kind of wants that round face, very pretty, big eyes. We got Frozen, then we got Moana. Then Pixar make Inside Out. So everything is kind of like following the same style. But then in the last couple of years, I think in the last 5-6 years, people is having an interest to develop like a new style. So we got shows like Arcane, and then we got like, oh, sorry, this is like a great example of what I was saying. So you can see that the background, all of this is hand painted. They did it in Photoshop, and then the characters are the only thing in 3D. I'm not sure. Maybe like these assets over here that are closer to the camera, they might be, like basically all this portion of the building where they're standing, just because they're interacting with them. Like this might be done in 3D and hand painted textures, but all the background is done in 2D. So that also allows you to look on ways how you can make things faster, because instead of making like this building and like, render each individual asset in the scene just to make it look pretty, you can just hand draw it and paint it yourself and then add your characters and make your animation. And as long as it's well integrated, it's going to look very realistic. And then, as I was mentioning, Spider-Verse is another good example of like taking a 2D style. This is more like a comic book style into 3D. I think before this movie, we didn't really have anything that looked similar of what they did. So for them, for like the studio, which I think it was Sony Pictures, they had to really develop tools, develop a workflow to be able to do this. But the second they did it, you can see that other studios start replicating, and other people was like, wait a second, I can do this. I've been dreaming all my life about like making my comic book characters into 3D and animate them and make my own like fan arts or my own projects, and now I can do that, and like it looks good. So that opened a lot of avenues for everyone, because you can clearly see here that there is like a combination of a lot of things. So you have a 3D model, which is Miles Morales. He is full on in 3D, but then the background is probably hand painted. Then you have like this cross hatching texture, and then these harsh shadows, but then you have like the individual lines that they paint in like around the model, or like to show the features. I think for them it was more like a composition, like a post-production thing that they did. But this is a good example of like things that you can accomplish. So again, you have like your cartoony characters, something very stylized, very fantasy world that you can do. Or then you can do something like this, which is very realistic. This is also probably a 3D scan. Like they told the person like sit here, and they went with a camera and take pictures around all their head, almost like every single detail of the person, and then they brought that to a 3D program and projected into that. And then you can probably use this for like a video game, a very realistic video game, or for something in virtual reality. So yeah, this is like something very realistic, almost photo, like, like if you see this, you're like, maybe it's a picture, but no, it's 3D. And you can see like the individual hairs on the, like her sweater or her jacket. And like, that's a crazy amount of detail that you can get with a program. Or then you have like, Last of Us 2. These are like characters done in 3D. The animation, I think, is mock-up too, but you can see how realistic they can get. And then all the, like, something you have to take into account is when they make a video game, like, yes, you are playing it and all the gameplay is done in a render, like an render engine, like Unity or Unreal. But if you want to make like a cutscene for your game, they probably have like separate models and separate assets that they're using specifically just for that cutscene and to make it happen, because they need to do animation, they need to do voice acting, they need to like also implement the textures and the environment. So usually it's like two separate process. So sometimes you work in video games, but you're not working directly on the game. You're kind of like working on a cutscene or like on a preview or something like that. So that's fun, and that's something like you could take into account the more like you explore what you want to do with your skills. And then again, completely fantasy style. This is for a game called Palia. I think this was rendered in Unreal Engine. I don't know which one of all of them, but this is done in Unreal Engine, and you can see something like, again, this is very similar to the first tree we're looking. It has like individual leaves too. In the game, it has some like wind that like blows those leaves, and it looks like kind of like realistic, but at the same time it's not. It's very like fantasy world. So you're also doing like probably hand painted textures that you can see in the tree, like the floor, someone is modeling that. So yeah, as I was mentioning, very stylized. And then you have something that is more like Hollywood, or like, like a Marvel movie, something that requires a lot of effects. This entire scene is from the Citadel movie, and it was fully done in 3D. It's like a train exploding. And then you can see how many elements on this image are 3D, which are all of them, but also how realistic it looks once you're done. So you have your fire, you have your explosions here, you have your lighting here, all this terrain that is on the background that you might think like, oh, it's a real mountain, it's real trees, while you're watching the movie. It ends that it's full on done in 3D. So this is a great example too of how realistic you can go and how many things you can do. But yeah, like a project like this, you have like a lot of people working on it, because someone has to model the tree, someone has to model the train tracks, this like platform where the train is going. But then you have like all your trees over here, your terrain, and then someone needs to light it, put some lighting, put the effects of the fire, put the effects of like the rails making like these sparkles. And then if you watch the movie, like you will see more like of the scene. But this is a good example of something you can do. And then, as I accidentally showed, you can also get into 3D printing, which I think is very fun. You have like tabletop games companies, you have toy companies, and then you have commissions on the internet that you can do with 3D. So usually you will go into a program like ZBrush. You can do that in Blender too, where you sculpt your character, you sculpt something, and then you 3D print it, and then you manually paint it like with like tiny brushes and miniature paintings. But this is a great example of like something you would do for like a tabletop game. I think like this is a dice shooter. I think you put your dice somewhere like on top, and it goes through his mouth, and it tells you how much you roll. But especially for toy companies, you have a lot of avenues to get an income. I don't know if people knows, but for Christmas trees, Disney does like these little like miniatures that you can put in your tree. Like Disney hires someone to make the 2D concept, the drawing, and then someone else will sculpt it in 3D, get it all ready and nice for a 3D printing, and then they send it, manufacture, paint it, and then they sell it in the Disney store. Or other examples of 3D printing, I saw someone today selling pot planters on Facebook Market. They in their home have a 3D printer, make pot plants with like a cool design, and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna print like 5 of them and sell them on internet, like Etsy or Facebook Market, and each for $20. So that's something that you could take into account. I have seen people like that is really into D&D commission characters. Like, I want my character to be done by an artist, and then they print it, and then they paint it, and then they use it to play. So you can find like a lot of people that like to do that, and that's like a secondary income that you could get just by developing a skill in something you really like. And then if you get really good, then you can use it to make money. And it doesn't mean that you have to be working for a studio directly, or like working for like a client directly. Lastly, you have like the architecture style. If you're very interested in architecture, like this is the type of renders that they do to show the preview of like maybe an apartment building that they're making, and then they want to sell the apartments individually when they have like the showrooms, before the project is complete. They will make this type of renders. I think this is for like the House Design USA magazine. So this was for like, this interior design magazine in the US. But it can show you like everything on this picture is done in 3D, and it's meant to show something that it could happen in real life. Someone could be like, I want this table, so I need someone to make it in 3D and design it, and then once we locked out the design, we can go and build the table, build the chairs. So yeah, usually you use different programs. In architecture and interior design, you use something called AutoCAD, but it's kind of like the same skills. If you know how to model a chair in Blender, then you later can model the same chair in a different program. So that's just another avenue that you can use to make money, or like another interest. that you might have. And then I want to show you like just other things that you can do with 3D. Because you can get into advertising, as I mentioned at the beginning. I'm just going to play this 30-second commercial super quick. Okay, that's pretty good enough. But as you can see, everything in this advertising is done in 3D. You know, like especially, I think you can notice like here, like, you know, these are like liquid right here. Like these are like liquid simulations. There is someone animating this. There is a person that did the textures and the labels for this, and then render it in a program, edit it, put it in comp, and then release the commercial for this brand. So most of the time, if you already have like an interest on graphic design or advertising, you can work with like a company making commercials or making product design. You know, they might be like, hey, we're gonna develop something. We're gonna develop a hand cream, and we just need like a preview of like different types of bottles. A lot of perfume commercials are in 3D. A lot of like cosmetic and beauty stuff is done in 3D. So again, that's just another thing you can do. I wanted to show this one because I think it's very interesting. This is a website called Acon, where people that uses like that they do webtoons or like comics that they use to buy assets in 3D. So this looks like a 2D room, but in reality, someone modeled this couch and make the textures and make like this cozy living room. And then what means is like they put it on for sale, and then another artist can buy this, and they're like, oh, I have like a comic idea where like my characters are having this interaction in this room. So they're gonna rotate that room several times. So instead of drawing the room 100 times, they can buy the assets or make them themselves in 3D and then use them as a reference to make the backgrounds. So that's also a good thing to know. I know for like animation and 2D layout is like a really good asset if you're already like are into background painting, if you're already into layout design in 2D. If you learn 3D, you can quickly make like your background in the program, like figure out all your perspective, and then get into the fun part that it will be designing the background and painting it. And that just saves time. And realistically, when you're working for like a client, you like your money and their time is sorry, what I want to say is when you're working for a client, time is money. So the faster you get to do some stuff, the better for you and for that person that you're making the projects. So you can take those shortcuts. It's not cheating. It's just using references. If you know, you can practice your own in your own time, your like skills for drawing or for 3D. But then the moment you get hired to do something, you want to use all your resources to do something faster and like at the best quality that you can get. So a good thing that you could do if you work in illustration would be using 3D assets just to get the basics quick and then move on into like the most complex part that is like the painting or like designing objects for like the background. And then I just wanted to show this one because I think it's very fun. You have a lot of like education resources that you can work with. You know, like someone modeled this guy, someone modeled this person, and is showing like these individual parts of the body. And this is a lot. This is something that they use a lot of in the medical field. That you will find like probably you have seen like random videos on TikTok where someone is showing like surgical procedure on how to like fix something. They often hire 3D artists to make those videos to later explain to other people like this is the procedure that you're getting, or like this is how we can do it. Because it's hard to like, you know, it's hard for a doctor to explain we're gonna open you and we're gonna fix this and fix this other thing and cut this. Like I think like most of people don't get it, what they're getting into when they're getting in terms of surgery. So more like often they get someone to do a basic video explanation of the procedure that they're getting. Same for like, I'm just gonna move back so we don't have the rotating image for too long. But educational videos are another thing that you can really get into it. For example, I work for like this was like just like a 2-3 week a small project where they were showing how a plane works. So we have a 3D plane that, you know, you're showing with the cameras like these are the seats, this is how the seat works, these are where your seat belts are, and this is how they connect, and this is how like your motor works and all the parts of the plane. And it was like a 30-40 minute video of just explaining the engines and the physics of how a plane is able to work and like fly. And all that video was done on 3D. So in that project, you have like people doing layout, you have doing 3D modeling, you have doing textures, and then you have some small rigging because it's objects, so not a lot of rigging. But then you have a lot of animation, a lot of mechanical animation, which is different from like a character animation. And then when we finish the project, someone render it and compile everything in a composition program like After Effects or Premiere, and then send it to the client, and then they use that for like a program that they were doing. So I have seen a lot of options for educational videos. That's something that you can get into. It's not as fun as working on like a TV show or like a cartoon show, but you learn a lot about like the topic that you're making, and then you learn a lot about like how to do like more technical stuff inside the program, and it's very fun. And then lastly, in like the options of what you can do with Blender, I wanted to show you this person, this guy Ian Humber. He has two small shorts called Salad Cup, which is a project that he did with his wife, where like he did everything that you're about to see on the screen was done in Blender by him. It was a one-person project in the production. Like you can see that there is many actors in the scene, but it was just one person doing like all the modeling, all the texturing, all the visual effects, and then later all the post-production of the project. So I'm just gonna play like a quick 30 seconds of what he did. And then if you have like your own time, I would really recommend to watch the complete series, because it's incredible of what you can do. And like what he did is amazing. Okay, that's pretty much like what I want to show. But you can see everything in this scene is made on 3D. I wanna put it back here. You can see that the entire elevator, even the house where she is done in 3D. So this is basically how movies are done. That's how, like, when you see like filming sets for like a Marvel movie, for like almost any movie at this point, is like there is a green screen on the back, and then later someone is making these environments and these things on 3D. So most of the time, only the objects that the person is interacting with are real objects. As you can see, there is like a small screen that she's like touching. That's the only like real thing in the scene, and everything else is done in 3D. And then this person has like a series of how he did this, and he shows how to accomplish this level using Blender. So again, you have like a lot of options of what you can do. You don't have to choose one or the other one. As I mentioned before, it's a skill. You can develop it, learn as much as you can about it, and then just apply it to whatever aspect of your life you think it could use it. And then I'm just gonna take a sip of water. I just want to talk about like the 3D animation pipeline, just because like I think most of the time when you get into 3D, or like all the tutorials don't really explain you what's happening behind the scenes. Like you only get to see the tutorials explaining how to use the program, but you don't really get to see how to work in the industry. As I mentioned, if you're making a project like a TV show, like a movie, or like a video game, you're working with like a large team of people. Depending on the size of the project, it could be something like 10 people, but sometimes you're working with hundreds of people in a big studio like NPC, like Disney, Pixar. They're studios that have like almost thousands of people just to accomplish one project. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about like the 3D animation pipeline, because that also summarizes what a 3D artist means in the industry. I see a comment from Danielle. Yeah, the clip is like, I really recommend for you guys to go on and look for Salad Cup. It's like, I think it's like 10-15 minutes each, and it's only 2 videos. But amazing storytelling and amazing 3D work. And it really gets you inspired to learn more and to like figure out how that person did everything. And in theory, you can do that yourself. You only need to figure it out, but the tools are in your hands, and you just need to put the time to learn them. And then once you understand them and you spend a couple hours learning the tools, the programs, and the skills, you can make like amazing things. So going back to the 3D pipeline, usually for like a show or like a TV show to go out, most of the studios don't have the money to fund them themselves, so they need to find what they will call like a client or an investor to fund this TV show. An example of this will be Netflix, or like sometimes toy companies invest money, like Hasbro as a toy company invest a lot of money to make TV shows for children's, so they can make toys later. So you have like your Paw Patrol, your Bluey, TV shows like that, where the reality is that they're trying to sell toys for kids, but they're also trying to make them enjoyable and at some degree some like educational for the children. So that would be like the pre-production of your project. That is like the money talk. Like, what are we gonna do? Who is gonna make it? Who is gonna pay for it? And once they figure out the money, then you get into like writing your story. This kind of almost apply for both animation and games. You still need to make a story. You need to make a script, maybe some storyboarding. If you have cinematics within your project, you need to do storyboardings and animatics, which is kind of like you put those storyboardings together in a sequence and you kind of have like a preview of where you're going to do. And then usually the studio will go back to the client and be like, okay, this is what we developed. This is the writing, the concepts for the characters, and the concepts for the environments. And now that we have that set in stone, you can move into production. Most often, you get like a back and forth between like the studio and the client being like, I don't know, I don't like the hair color of this character, or I don't like her dress, or like we want something more cuter or like more scary. And then just spend like a couple months just on like the pre-production of a project. And most of projects don't even pass that point and they don't get to see the light, because sometimes the investor don't think like they will be worth, like they won't make money out of them. So they're like, it's not safe for us. So even though we already spent a bunch of money and like a lot of time trying to develop this, we're just gonna call it off. So that can happen. It happens a lot in the industry for like both video games and animation projects, where they just kind of like die at some point of the production. But if you make it out of this stage, you move into production, which is 3D layout, modeling, texturing, rigging, animation, and then later VFX, lighting, rendering. 3D layout means that you're moving your cameras, where your camera in 3D, it's in a weird way, it's kind of like when you're filming in real life, that you have to put a camera in your scene and say, okay, my camera is going to point here and it's going to move, and you still need to learn all the composition tools that you will learn for filming in real life. So that will be your 3D layout, just like setting in your scene your characters, your cameras. So later when other people touch that scene, they kind of know where things are. And like you work in 3D layout works very close with storyboarding to make that happen, both in 2D and 3D. Once you get that and you get your concepts, you move into modeling, which, as I mentioned, usually the studio will give you, or your client will give you a character design or a prop design, and they're like, we need to make this princess, or we need to make like this dog, or we need to make like a room for this character. And then they give you the concepts, and then you get hands-on and you start making those assets in your 3D program. Once you're done with that, you need to make something called UVs, that we will talk about that later. And you get into texturing, that is kind of like your painting. Like you can hand paint it. You can do something called procedural textures that are kind of like more, I don't know how to explain it, but like when you see rocks, that they're kind of like, they're made out of smudges and grits and, a flat colors, that you can make that with a program without like going directly and hand paint like each dot of the rock. You can put like a mask and say to the program, I want my rock to look like this, and the program will do it for you. You just need to know how to do it. Usually, if you're making a model, you're probably gonna have to texture it as well. It depends on the project that you're working and like the size of the studio, but it's a good skill to have. And in the workshop, we will be touching a little bit of texturing and UVs, just as I mentioned, especially for like your portfolio. If you're modeling something, at the end of the day, you kind of want to see it finish it. You kind of want to see the textures. If you're modeling an apple, like you want to say, well, my apple is red or it's green, and it's like the perfect apple that just came out of the supermarket, or it's an apple that, it's been in my backpack for like a week and it's now all like full of bruises. So that's kind of like what you do with texture, is that you create a story for the object and then you make a look for it. Then you move into rigging, which is giving like, I describe it as bones, like, you give like a structure to your character. that will make able for another person to move it. It's kind of like a puppet. So you put like a skeleton in your, like, you know, like if this girl is your 3D model, you need to put like a skeleton like in her arms, in her legs, in her head, especially on the face, you know, so she can blink, so she can open her mouth, close her mouth, so she can hold this balloon, you know, because usually your 3D model will come with like 5 open fingers, and someone has to rig it so you can do this. Or like if you can grab an object, like a pen, you need to rig your character. And then once you're able to do that, you can move into animation. Then you can move into adding your special effects, you know, your water, your fire simulations, smoke. If you have like a big explosion in your scene, that would be your visual effects. And then you add lights in your scene. So of course, if you don't put any lights when you render, it will be all black. So like the real world, you need to like put some lights in your scene and tell the program how the light works. And the program will calculate that light for you and give you like a final image that then you render and then just send to post-production, which is another team of people that will finalize those renders. Sorry, I was looking at the question, Kit Bash 3D. No, I have not used Kit Bash 3D. The programs I know are Maya, 3ds Max, a Blender, ZBrush, Substance Painter. But I haven't used that specific program. But honestly, if you can model in any program, you can model in another program. Because once you know the skills of modeling, you just need to sit, you know, and watch a couple tutorial videos and like bang your head against the screen, just being like, I don't understand this. But then in a week or two, you will understand the program and you will know how to navigate the program. And then you can do the things that you were doing in another program, you can do them now on this one. So yeah, going back to post-production, you have compositing, which is like compiling all those renders into like a video and then tweaking stuff. Like people will tweak the lighting, will tweak just other stuff inside. Like a lot of like, you know, green screen is done here. Adding, you know, your back, like if you're rendering a character animation and then you have a green screen, that's when you integrate both. It's in composition. So it's like another different pipeline and a different workflow, but it's good to know. And at least if you like you want to show off your model, you kind of need to know a little bit of editing because you need to take all your renders and then compile them in a program. You can use After Effects, DaVinci editing, or like I know there is like open source programs, but even Blender has like a compositing side inside the program. So technically you don't need to migrate to another program. You can stay inside Blender and do all your editing inside. And then, yeah, this is how you do like a 3D animation project in like a very summarized way, which is very similar to the video games. Now, more specific on the 3D modeling and 3D texturing pipeline, I'm going to show you this image and we're going to talk about this workflow, which is how you make 3D models and how you can get this very realistic tree in your program without breaking your computer, you know, because it is very demanding for like a computer to like get something like this. So I think I forgot to mention, oh no, I did mention this before. This person, this tree, oh, sorry, that we look at the beginning is done in photogrammetry pipeline, which means it's a 3D scan. So it's a little bit different from like what you would do for animation, or like if you're making your asset from scratch, like if you're making your own tree, it will be different. But this is a good representation of all the steps that you go through the pipeline, which are here in this like nice diagram. So you have the creative direction, which is the studio saying like, we want to make this project and we're all excited about it. And then they give you your concept, and then you make like, okay, now that I have this concept of a tree, I need to make like a blockout. If you are a 2D artist, you have probably heard about this, which is you work from the general to a specifics, which means is you start very light, kind of like with a sketch or like a rough model of what you want, and then you start building that detail. This reason is because it's easier to work with like a low poly mesh, which will be something similar to this, you know. If you want to modify something, if you don't like something, you can easily tweak things in this mesh. That it will be doing it on this one that has like a lot of polygons, a lot of like little tiny triangles and squares. That's what we call a polygon. It's just like each individual face will be a polygon. So it would be very difficult to work with like something this high right away, like to start something. So you usually start with a blockout, something simple that you can manipulate, and it gives you like a quick idea of what you want to do. Then you work more on it and you create a low poly mesh. Most of the time, that's it. You're good to go. Low poly mesh, you do your text, your UV maps, textures, boom, you're done. You just 3D model something. But as I mentioned before, if you need to put a lot of detail into this object, you need to do this workflow of a high poly mesh, which is like this one that we're seeing here. This person 3D scan a tree to get all this detail instead of sculpting them manually. So now they have to create this low poly mesh, and then they have to do their UVs. Like UV grabbing is kind of like a map that tells the program where to project those textures, because that's what it is this beautiful tree that you're seeing here. In reality, it doesn't exist. It's just a projection. So it's not this, it's this. So you have this low poly mesh. You create a map to tell the program, this is where I want all my details, all my colors, all the high poly details that I make, either by 3D scanning the tree or by sculpting it in another program. And then you project it on top of the mesh. And that's how you get like a very realistic or like a lot of details into your model. And that this is something like very important to know out of like even before you get into 3D, because it will make your workflow easier, and it will make those steps of learning very easy, because now you understand where are you heading. Most of the time, if you just start modeling and kind of stumble into the program and you don't really know where you're heading, you don't have like that clear direction that at some point you have, you know, you need your textures, you need your UV maps to project those textures. And then what if you want to make like something more complicated? So this is a great example on how to make it. And then as you can see, then you make a low poly mesh, you make a high poly mesh. Then the normal maps is kind of like the details that you will project. I will show you later a normal map and how they look. And then you make your textures. And then again, if you need to rig or animate that model, you will do it. And then you will send it to your game engine. Most of the time, like it will be Unreal Engine or Unity are like the two most popular in the industry right now. But it depends on the studio. It depends on the project that you're working. And then this is like another sample that is like if you're making that asset from scratch. So this is what I mean for like a blocking. It just gives you a rough idea of, I'm going to make a hammer, how my hammer is going to look. You're going to look like a bunch of reference, a bunch of pictures of hammers, and say, okay, this is like a very simple version of what I want to do. And then once you do that, then you can refine it and make it into a low poly, which is, this is the mesh that you're going to use to, like, as a prop in your project. You are going to render the low poly, and then if the character is interacting with something, it's going to be with this one, not with this one. Usually you take your low poly, you make your UV maps, and then you will take it into a different program like ZBrush, and then do all the details sculpting. You can see that they did like this little wooden like cracks like here and here, and then they add some more details like on the metal part. And then you take those details into a texturing program. Most often it's going to be Substance Painter, or I think it's Marmoset Toolbag. Again, when you work in 3D, you're working in a lot of programs. So my recommendation is, don't get married with a program. Even I recommend Blender, of course, because you can do almost all these steps of the pipeline. You can do them inside the program. But depending on the project you're working, they might tell you that you need to work in a specific program, just because they're more advanced in that specific thing. I personally think that Blender can do everything, but because it's open source, it has some limitations. So you can do sculpting, you can do your like something like this in Blender, but it doesn't have like all the tools that a program like ZBrush will have. Or I know some people use Nomad sculpting. Same for texturing. You can do hand painting textures in 3D, sorry, in Blender, but then it doesn't have like the same flexibility that, for example, Substance Painter has. So you can get by, you can for sure make it all inside Blender, but depending on what you're making, you might need to do it in another software. And if you're working for a client, you have to work in the software that they tell you to work. So once again, if you learn the basics and you learn how to like do a hammer like this, you can do a hammer in any program that they tell you to do it. You just need to learn that program, and then you can easily transfer those skills to a different software. I do want to show you something. I'm going to show you something inside Blender that I was working, just to show you how like good it can get. I was working on this project, which is a tutorial from Flipped Normals, but I'm like working on 2D integrate with 3D. So you can see that my objects are in 3D. Just gonna put it here. You know, I have my liquid, I have my teacup, and all my textures are hand painted. Like I went with like a brush and painted myself. And then when I was referring to UV maps, I'm referring to these guys. So you can see I'm gonna isolate this toast. This is my 3D object. This is a toast that I wanna make in the program, and I wanna hand paint. Very simple. I need to tell the program, like the program will fill information for me, but I have to tell the program where to put that information. So I have to tell them, like, you know, this is the top of my toast. This is the side. This is the back. So I have to go and individually make those maps and tell the program where that information it is. And then once I do that, I can paint it. So if I go to texture painting mode, and I'm in the flat market, I can paint over here, and you can see that it reflects on this side. And then if I do something like, oops, I put like a line here, or like I want to put the line there, you can see that over here, my line is here, but it's also here in the side of the toast. So that's how you do texture painting in Blender, and pretty much in any program. But I thought like that would be it. Like, sorry, I think that it would be easier for you to see like an UV map in action than just kind of try to imagine. Another way to think about UV maps is, I think it's like this meme. Oh, here it is. It's this meme that says you have your 3D model, your chocolate, and then you want to make it look like Santa. This is your UV map. You know, you are telling the program basically, this is my shiny part, this is my red, this is like the white, and then when you grab your model again, it's gonna grab the model and have like the shape of what you're making. So I think this is a funny way to visualize UVs, but this is basically what you're doing, is that you're like making like your model in a flat image, and then you're painting that flat image, and then you're putting it back in the program and telling the program like, take this image and grab my model. And the program will be like, fantastic, I can do that for you, and it will make it look like the thing that you're intending to do. So a good example of that is for like a basic asset that I did, for example, this sword. This is how my UV maps and my textures look. So you can see that my sword is like a flat image in both sides, you know, because I can make them different. So this is the front, this is the back. This is kind of like the leather belt that is going around the back of the sword. And then you have your gems and all of that. And these are hand painters textures done in Substance Painter. So I hope that gives you like a rough idea of how that works. I don't know if at this point that I've been talking and giving you a lot of information, if there is any question you have or like something that you want to share, you're more than welcome to like raise your hand or like put it in the comments. Okay, good. So yeah, and then you can see that this is my low poly version of the sword. And then I took it into another program and make like the details for like this dance. And then add some like texture to, you know, like these little cuts in the sword, and then make the leather look like that leather, that it has some dents. And just another example is like this baseball bat. As you can see, the low poly version of this model, it doesn't have like the grabs. I paint those. I make them on, again, I make them on ZBrush, and then I later took them to Substance Painter. And so they're not real. They're full on painted. And then I'm using a map, which is a normal map. They usually look like this, like purple. So you can see that all my details are here. And I'm telling the program, where do I want those details? So like a good way to see it is kind of like a black and white map. You can also use black and white for normal maps. Usually the programs use a purple. The light goes like out and the dark goes in. So if I want to make a crease in the baseball bat, like that's where I get like these black dents. And then that's how I did the texture for like the grabs and the bandages around the baseball bat. And then when I finish it, I just took those images and gave them to the program, and the program says like, okay, I understand this information, and now I can make it look like this. And, it saves on rendering time. It makes like the prop very easy to use, very light. It doesn't have a lot of polygons. Like if I want to make like each individual graph, I will have like 1, 2, 3, like maybe 4 more objects than I don't need. So that's a good way that I can show you. Like these are the UV maps. You can see that I cut my baseball bat through here around the edges and then make it flat. And then the program will read it as like a 3-dimensional object. So that's kind of how you make textures in 3D. And then perfect. Perfect. And then this is kind of like all the information I want you to have before like we start working on the program, just because, as I say, I think like most often you don't touch these topics before you get into 3D, and then halfway you get confused on like, I don't understand what I'm doing or how to look for what I need. So ideally today with this masterclass, you walk out of here saying like, okay, I kind of have a rough idea in my brain of how can I make a 3D model from like this blocking stage into like a texture and very detailed model. And then if you sign up for the workshop and work with me, we will go through those steps and I will teach you how to go from here to here. But today you kind of know where you're heading, and then even in your own time you could just start looking for that information yourself. I see someone has a question. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Dan. It's just my email is Daniel Utabara.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for your time and thank you for this information. I had a question about like when you're modeling like a 3D object and like you have a reference, like how much of that reference should you use and like how much should you like add to your own like style, so like you don't like copy like a reference that you saw like online or like another artist? Be my question.
I think it depends on what you want to accomplish with the 3D model, really. If you want to, because it is important to stick to reference and like make your model as close as possible to that reference. If you're going to work with a studio, if you get like maybe like a character that you're working, you want to almost like do it side by side. You might run into some problems, but ideally it will be 100% close to the reference. Just because, as I mentioned, like the studio pays someone to make that concept. So your job and what they're paying you for is to make that concept in 3D and make it 100% close to it. That's if you're working for like a person or like a project or a client. Now, if you're making it for yourself, if you're making like something like a fan art, I think that's where you have more flexibility. You can do something that looks like something that will be, I don't know, I'm gonna pick a TV show as like, let's say Adventure Time, because we're gonna do an exercise on that. If you want to make like a model that could live in that world, you can, take more creativity and you can have more fun with it. Also, you could like, a good thing that you can do is look for real objects, like, an example, the hammer. You're like, I wanna just explore what to do on 3D. You can go and look like a real hammer, and you're like, well, but I want to make it like a cartoony one. And now you're taking that like creative freedom to make a cartoony hammer, and you can have fun with it and you can make it different. And that could be a good example in your portfolio of how can you make something very real into something completely different. Another thing to take into account, as I say, it depends on what you want to accomplish with the model. Because at the same time, if it's a piece that you want to add for your portfolio, And let's say you want to show the studio, like, I can make like a model that is accurate to the concept and that it looks exactly like it and it can live in the same universe as this concept, then ideally just stay very close to that. A good way to avoid like I don't know, like copyright issues. For example, the house I make, the oh, sorry, how do I get out of here? This house, this one that has like a 2D concept under it. I ask permission to the artist, like, hey, I just want to make a fan art. I'm not selling it. It's just for my portfolio. It's just a piece I want to do. I really love your art. And the person was, yeah, absolutely. Actually, the artist gave me a print for free along another print, and they signed them and they gave it to me because they were like, oh my God, I love it. And I think that's super cool that you're making something I did into 3D. So that's something that you can take into account. Like if you find like a really cool concept on the internet that you're like, I really want to make it and I really want to make, like, put it in my portfolio, you can ask permission to the artist. You can message them through, like, I messaged him on Instagram and then he answered. Or like you can make sure to give the proper credit. And then most of the time people won't tell you anything because they are also artists. So they're very excited to see their concepts being used and coming to life. So in other moments I have done fan art or I have done concepts for that I already saw from another artist, and then you're making them into 3D. As long as you give proper credit, you should be good. No one is gonna sue you. You run into problems if you want to sell it. Like if I wanted to sell this house in a real market, or like I think you were saying that Kid Bash was like a place where I could sell stuff. If I wanted to do that, I could get into trouble because then the artist is like, hey, you're using my ideas and you're making money out of it. So we have to come to a solution whether I pay the artist like a license to use the concept, or like I have to take it down if the person is like, no, I don't want you to sell it. So as long as it's for fun, for like a portfolio piece or like a fan art, you should be fine and you can play with it. If you want to do an asset that you later want to sell, I would recommend either you can hire someone. For example, you can hire a concept art artist and pay them like $50 to make a character rotation, or like maybe not $50. It's probably going to be more. It's closer to 100 on the internet. But you can commission an artist and be like, hey, I want this 3D character. Can you make this for me? And then when they send you that, you make that, you pay for that. So it's yours and you can make it, and you can make whatever you want with that. So that's something to take into account. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions, or if that kind of solve the question
Yeah,
you have.
that was perfect. Yeah, I actually had a follow-up question. Also, like you said, you worked on indie games before. Like, how was that like kind of like the process of like creating your own stuff and like creating your own assets? Like, how is that like different from like almost like a regular studio?
Depends on the project. I will say it's very similar. Indie just means less funding, or like private funding. So there is money involved. Sometimes indie projects don't involve any money. As I was mentioning, Trick or Treat, this project has zero money on it, but Space Flux does. The person that is making Space Flux was like, I have like this amount of money saved, and so he kind of hires me to make a specific assets for his game. So it's more like like freelance relationship for this indie project. Like he will tell me like, hey, I need this character, here are the concepts, can you make it? And then I will be like, yes, I can make it for you. It will take me this amount of time and I will charge you this. And then we do it like that way. Or you get hired by in the studio and you complete the project with them, and it should be like the same experience as going to like a big studio. I think the only difference is that the size of the studio probably is very small. You know, if you're going to a very large project, you're probably only doing modeling, and they're gonna hire to only do one thing. But if you're working for an indie project, they're probably like, we need someone that can do like 5 things, you know? And you might be able to do those 5 things, or you might not. And then you can kind of like negotiate with them. You can be like, I can do the model and the texturing, maybe the rigging, but I don't know anything about animation. And they can be like, okay, that works for us. Or like, oh no, we need someone, what you call like a 3D generalist, which is someone that can do basically almost all the steps in the pipeline. Like someone that can model, texture, rig, animate, do their own lighting and their own rendering. So when you work with indie, you kind of might run into those type of projects where they're like, we need you to do several steps of the pipeline, and it's only you working on all of that. Compared to like a bigger studio where like they probably just hire you for like modeling and texturing, which is usually the 2 that go hand in hand.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
No problem. But yeah, in general, it should be like the same experience. I recommend like most of the indie projects and stuff I have done as a freelance, I have got them through LinkedIn, like by posting often. I recommend using LinkedIn as your, create an audience. Unfortunately, in the state of the industry right now, they kind of like it used to be like you were good at something and you could get hired with no problem. Right now, just because there is a fewer jobs and we're going through a little bit of an economic recession, at least in Canada and the United States, it gets a little bit complicated to get jobs. So now you have to kind of become like a 3D influencer in LinkedIn, where like you're posting often and you're showing your work so you can get noticed. And then ideally, if you're posting regularly, maybe once a week, twice a week, the idea is that someone within the platform sees your work and they're like, oh, I need that. I need that person that does good trees for my video game. And they're like, okay, we're going to contact them, send them a DM, hire them. And that's how you can get jobs. But if you kind of like wait until like you have like a perfect piece to post then, in the meantime, you might not get hired for any projects because like nobody knows that you're working on that. So I think that's a good like a recommendation I can give to everyone is if you want to get into 3D art and you want to get a job within the animation or video game industry, you need to be very active on the community because it's a very small community. I live in Toronto, so there is only like a few studios in Toronto. Most of them work for like TV for kids, Paw Patrol is done in Toronto. There is a couple in Vancouver. I know Atomic Cartoons was doing like the baby Spider-Man. I have friends working on baby Muppets, a lot of baby stuff. Dora the Explorer in 3D, like you're probably going to be like, if you're working with a studio in Canada, you're probably working on that type of projects. So you need to show studios that you can work on those projects. So when you put pieces in your portfolio, you need to make sure that you're aiming on a similar style. So it can be your own creation, like your own character. But when you're making it, think like, okay, will this character be a good character in Dora the Explorer or like in Paw Patrol? And if it is, you're probably gonna get hired by the studio that make that show. Or if you're trying to get into the video game industry and you're trying to get into like a very realistic game, something like The Last of Us, Elden Ring, you know, like the type of games that where they're pushing for like something more photorealistic, then you have to show in your portfolio that you're able to do that and that you have the skills to do something like that works in their game. I don't know if anyone has any more questions or anyone wants to add anything.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you.
Perfect, no problem. So we were here. As I said, this is kind of like all the information I wanted to give you before getting into like working a little bit in Blender. Just if there is any like beginner, you know, this is the first time you're like, I kind of want to learn 3D and I don't know where to start. Hopefully you're here today. These are the minimum recommended specs of a computer to run Blender. This is the recommended, but you know, you can almost run it in a toaster and you should be fine. You can also run it in Mac. You should be good. Mac is tricky because you know, like your command, you don't have control, you have command, and that can shift some things around. Some hotkeys that you find on the internet and most of the people use, they might not work in Mac just because their layout and their keyboard is different. But you can absolutely run it in Mac, and then you will find a lot of resources and forums where people is having like the same issues you're having. So you can, you know, the Blender community is really great for that. You can find a lot of educational videos, a lot of documentation. If you have like a problem, always assume that someone else is having the same problem as you. So you can go to Google and find that for yourself. The idea of signing up into a workshop is that if instead of spending 20, 30 minutes, you know, in forums and looking for YouTube videos on how to fix something or how to do something, is that you have like kind of that one-on-one guidance. So if your program is doing something weird, instead of Googling like my program broke and I don't know what to do, you kind of like text me and you're like, my program broke and I don't know what to do. And hopefully within a couple minutes, I can be like, oh, this is what happened. Usually when you start, like, there are only like a few things that can break. So ideally, I will be with you to guide you through this is what went wrong and this is how you fix it. So you can kind of expedite that process and you don't have to like spend a lot of time like in the finding the problem part, and you can spend more time in the learning part. I also recommend a mouse. If you are going to work on 3D, you need a mouse. Again, a lot of hotkeys, a lot of the movement is done with the mouse, like left click, middle wheel, with the wheel and right click. So ideally you have like a mouse. It doesn't have to be a fancy one. It can be like the cheapest mouse, but it will make your process very easy. For the workshop and for the purposes that we're going to be doing today and the workshop in January, you can completely be fine with a mouse. I personally use a mouse like at least 60-70% of the time. The moment you get into more advanced stuff, you might want to get a display tablet or just a drawing tablet. This is specific if you want to get into texturing and sculpting, because you're gonna need like the pressure of the pen, you know, like the same way like when you are working on Photoshop that you have some brushes that if you press harder, you're getting a thicker line, or you're pressing lighter, you're getting like something different, like a thinner line. You have the same in 3D, especially for sculpting, like to get all those details, you are gonna need like a pen. Otherwise, you can only go so far with the mouse. And also for your own like health, if you are using the mouse all the time, especially for like something that requires pressure, you're gonna destroy your hand. So ideally, you at least get like a drawing tablet that like you're drawing on the tablet and you're seeing what's happening on the screen, that you don't have to put that much pressure in your hand, and you can keep doing like the same things that you're doing with like a display tablet, just like in your screen, like in your main screen instead of a secondary screen. And then usually these ones only cost like a couple $100, like $100 or $200, and then something like this can cost between 800 to like 2,000, something. The fancier you get, the more expensive. I got a Wacom one for like 700 in 2020, which was like the cheaper version of the tablet, but it was like a good investment. Because as I say, I was destroying my hand. I was like borderline getting carpal tunnel just by clicking. So again, for today and for the workshop, you're more than fine with a mouse. But just think about it in the future. Hopefully, you're able to do like that investment for your future self. And then this is an example of how I learned 3ds Max. I did this in Humber. The exercise that we did that day is just grab a character, very simple, almost like a Funko Pop. I actually use a Funko Pop as a reference, and today I will be using a Funko Pop as a reference for what I'm going to show you. But it's kind of like a simple character that you can make with cubes. It might not look like super pretty, but you're going to learn all the navigation inside the program, and then hopefully we get the time to put like a quick light and then do a quick render, and that will be your first 3D model, 3D and 3D render in the program. So yeah, and then it was really useful because it teach, like, you stumble into the program and you learn how to navigate while you're doing something, and that is fun and you kind of like recognize. So it's around 7:40. I think I'm gonna take like a maybe 5-10 minute break, so for everyone to grab up a little bit of water. If you have any questions, I can answer them during this time. But also, if you don't have Blender, this is a good time to download it. You can go to their website and then you can just hit download, and then you can download it if you want to follow up with the tutorial once we're back from the break. Depending on your internet, you might have it ready or not, but I'm giving you that option. So I think I'm gonna be back. We can be back like at 7:50 to start like the demo. And then yeah, if there is any questions in the meantime, I can answer them. Or if not, I'm just gonna stop the sharing screen and then turn off my camera and come back in 10 minutes with everyone. Okay, it looks like everyone is good. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And I'm gonna pause my camera. I'm gonna go for a little bit of water, and then I will be back at 7:52. Then we can start the demo. Okay, I'm back from my little break. I hope everyone is here, so we can start the demo section of this masterclass. I'm gonna go back and present my screen now. Perfect. So Blender, it's Blender time. I'm gonna address one thing before we even start doing something. Oh, first, when you open Blender for first time, you are gonna see this menu. as you can see, you have like different layouts depending like in the program. We usually spend time in general, which has everything. And then I think in your own time, you can like explore these ones, because I didn't know. And I really don't know how to do it, but you can do 2D animation. And I know the last version of Blender has like a lot of nice tools to do 2D inside the program. And then you have your sculpt mode, a sculpting mode, your mode for like special effects and video editing I was mentioning before. So you can technically do all your video editing inside Blender as well. So that's something that if you're interested, you could like look tutorials later. But for purposes of today and the workshop, we're gonna just be in the general mode. And then you're gonna notice as soon as I open the screen, we have a cube. We have the default Blender cube. I think the reason why they put like a cube when you open the program is, like most of your objects, you can do them from a cube, a cylinder, or an UV sphere. But most of the time, you're going to start for a cube. Like if you're making a table, a chair, even sometimes characters, like you can start like the head with a cube. There is a running joke inside the Blender community, and is that you have to delete the default cube. And when I started Blender, I spent like an hour, almost 2 hours, just looking why, if there was any reason, because I have work in other programs where the teachers or like the instructor told me like you need to delete the default color palette or the default canvas. The reason they gave me is because usually those default things already have information, and then when you save them and then you want to reference them again, like bring those objects into another scene, you could have problems because again, those objects already have like information. But apparently this is not the case with Blender. I think it's just a joke in the community. And I can guarantee, so you don't have to spend the hour I did, you can use the default cube. But now the running joke is like, it's kind of like your first sacrifice to start modeling, is that you go ahead and delete the default Blender cube. How you do that? To click anything, you click your object with the left click, you select it and you hit delete, and that's it. Other thing is that you see as soon as you open your program is that it came with a cube, and it also came with a camera and with a light. Most people will delete those and make new ones and start working with like a clean canvas. You don't have to, like, generally there is no reason for you to like not use the default ones. It's just a joke. I just think it's funny because almost every other tutorial I see, like they start by deleting the cube and then sometimes just bringing the same cube back just to start modeling in the cube. But it's nothing serious if you like ever forget to delete it and model something like a character in that. Nothing bad is going to happen. It's not going to come and haunt you later. Just to show you the program, this is your viewport. This is viewport. This is where you spend most of your time. As you see, the cube was here. This is where your 3D model is going to be. And almost all the magic happens here. And then you have like two menus here. You have like this guy over here, which is like a timeline for animation. We don't really use this unless you are animating. So you can just like bring it down and make it disappear, and you should be good. Important menus for now is this guy over here. Is called the outliner. Is where all your objects in your scene are gonna be. I'm gonna add another cube. I'm gonna go to add mesh cube, and boom, you see that right here I have a cube now. So every object you make that is in your viewport is also gonna be here in your outliner. So this is like a very important menu. And then this is called like the property menu. You have like a lot of options here. You have your tools, your render options, output, like modifiers is an important one. Particle systems, physics systems, constraints. You don't really, unless you're working with those, you don't really need them. The most common is materials that we're going to use today. Texture that at some point you're going to use if you want a texture. And then the tool options. And then if you come here, you're going to see that this is all the incredible things that you can do with Blender. As I was mentioning, you like layout means just kind of like the default menu, just like basic one out of the box. But you can do modeling, as you can see. You can do a sculpting, and you can see like right here, like the tools are different, and now you have like some brushes that you can use to sculpt something. You have an UV editor, as I was mentioning before. You can see this is kind of like how my cube is on grab. It has like this shape that is like a flat shape and like a flat shape representation of a 3D object. You have your texture painting where you can do your hand painted textures. There is something called like the shading menu. This is a little bit different, but you can see that it's kind of like a preview to see how your model is doing, how your textures are doing. You see that it has like this building light that lets you see how your model interacts with real life. Real light. So yeah, this one you're probably, when you're texturing and you're getting more into procedural texturing or like node textures, you're gonna use this menu a lot. If you're into animation, you're gonna use this guy. This is your camera, your viewport, and your timeline. So this is like a very useful layout if you're doing animation. You have a specific one for rendering. That here's where you're gonna see like your render image at the end. Then you have compositing, where you can do like the video editing and like some of like the color correction, noise correction, like all like green screen. This is where you can do all those things. Geometry nodes, that's like a different one that we're not gonna really talk about today, but it lets you create like objects, like particles. And then you have a scripting that is like if you are into something like Python or like programming, and you like to code and develop like systems to do other things, you're probably going to spend a lot of time here. I know people use a lot of coding and the scripting for rigging, you know, instead of when you rig a character, you have to put like bones. For example, I'm going to rig my arm. I have to put a bone in my shoulder, in my left arm, in my elbow, in my, like in the wrist to make this motion. And then I'm also going to need one on each finger. And then as you can see, each finger has like a knuckle. So I'm going to need bones on each one. And that's something that you can make faster with scripting. And then you kind of like do it once for one character and then put that in a code. And then you can put it in another character. And it kind of like does that heavy workload for you. And you can explore more options with that. But that's like a very a specific part of Blender. So we are going to hang out most of the time today in the layout menu. So things that I want to show you in Blender is, okay, we're going to start with like the basic navigation. Just like if this is the first time you're in Blender and you're like, okay, cool, how I have a cube and how do I move my cube? Well, first, how do I move around my cube? Like right now I'm stuck on this view and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to pull this menu super quick. You feel free to screenshot these. These are like the most basic, useful shortcuts for Blender. I put them here so you don't have to look for them and you can kind of follow the tutorial with me. And then as you can see, I think over here in this part of the screen, you can see the keys that I'm using on my keyboard. I'm also gonna, just to make it easy to visualize, I'm gonna turn off my cursor. Perfect. So you can kind of follow my mouse and you don't get lost around. Okay, so I'm gonna move this. Can I move this out? You guys ready? Perfect. I'm gonna put it like on the side now. Okay. Rotate. This is why I say you need a menu. Sorry, a mouse. Because if you wanna rotate your viewport, you need the hotkey for this is middle click or the wheel. So I'm pressing right now my wheel, and you can see that I'm moving around my object. It's kind of stuck in the object, but I'm moving around. I'm able to look all the sides and all the angles of this cube. Perfect. If I want to pan, I have to press Shift, and then with the middle wheel, I can drag it around and I can move it. So I can like get out of here, come to the side, up and down. So you know that's useful if you're like, if you have multiple objects in the scene and you want to like see everything around, you press Shift and then the wheel, and you can move at the same time. Zoom, as you can see, you can use the wheel. My mouse is a little bit choppy, so sometimes you see like kind of like jumps in and out. I'm just sorry about that. The mouse is dying. I gotta get a new one. But you can use the wheel to zoom, or you have like a more like precise one that is Control, and you press the wheel and you move up and down, and it kind of like does like a smoother mouse. Sorry, a smoother zoom in and out on your object. And that's kind of like easy to move. So just to go back, basic navigation, middle wheel to rotate your object, sorry, to rotate your viewport around your object. Shift middle wheel to pan around the scene. And then Control middle wheel to zoom in, zoom out. And then optional, just middle wheel to like do this movement. It's a little bit choppy, but it's useful. I usually use that one. What else I can show you right now? Okay, perfect. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me hang out to the scammers. Perfect. Now that you know how to move around your object, you're gonna be like, okay, I wanna move my cube. What can I do? So again, I'm gonna bring this menu with the hotkeys. The ones we're gonna use is, as I mentioned before, left click lets you select your object. If you left click outside in your viewport, it's gonna deselect everything. If you click your object, it's gonna select it. Alternative, you can come to your outliner and look for your object and select it, and it's gonna select here. Same for like, oh, I wanna select my camera. So you can see that now I select my camera. If you wanna move the cube, you use G. And you can see that now I can just move it and drag it around the screen. But this is not like precise. It just kind of like moves around, and now I have it there. But it like maybe I didn't want it there, or like I wanted to move it in a specific axis. So something kind of nice that Blender has is that you can move your objects in your 3 axis. I'm gonna come and show you right here. This menu right here. You have your X, Y, and Z axis. If you press these guys, you're gonna come to your, or like what is called orthographic view. I will touch a little bit more on that. For now, I'm just gonna come to the perspective view again. But if I wanna move the cube, I'm gonna press X, and now you can see that it moves like back and forward in the x-axis. Like you can see, again, I'm in the x-axis. So if I press G to grab my object and then I press X, it's only going to move it on that X axis. Maybe I don't want to move it in there. Maybe I want to move it on the Y. So I press Y, and it's going to move it on the Y. And if you press Z, it's going to press on Z. If you hit right-click, it's going to cancel your movement. So it's going to go back to the place it was. If you press left-click, it's going to confirm your movement. So once again, so we don't get lost, you grab your object with G, and then to move it in whatever axis you want, you press either X, Y, or Z. I'm going to move it on X. I'm going to bring it forward to the camera. And I'm going to say, OK, I want it here. So I press left click, and it's going to confirm my movement. And that's just one way to move your object. There is two more. The second way is if you press G and you press the middle wheel, you see now you can see the lines for both axes. And if you move your cube in if you press middle wheel and drag your cube, it's going to snap to the axis you want to move it. So it snaps to X. I want to move it up, and it snaps to C and right here. So that's another easy way to move. And again, if you hit left click, you confirm your movement. So I'm just going to do that again, because I know it can be like a little bit complicated to like understand, especially if you come from other programs, to be like, what you mean I can't do this? Again, G to grab, and then press middle wheel. Once you see that like those lines up and down and with your axis, you can just like choose where you want to snap the object, and then you let it go, and you hit left click to confirm. So now you have it where you want it. There is a third way to move it, and it's this option here called transform. And when you click it, you can see that it has like this weird like pivot, like it's called pivot point. Some people call it gizmo. I'm gonna call it pivot point, that has like, different things. The arrows are for movement. So it lets you move your object in those axes again. The wheel is to rotate. You can rotate your object. Or if you like the little squares are to scale your object. So this tool that allows you to move your object, it also has like all the other tools integrate within the same tool. Most of the time, I personally prefer this one just because I come from Maya. And this is very similar to the movement that I do in Maya, so I feel more comfortable. Most of the time when like scaling or rotating with the other shortcuts I'm going to show you, I think they're not as precise. Now to see how you will scale this cube, I'm going to put move here, which is G. As you can see, all your you can either use this guy over here, like this toolbox, or you can use the shortcuts that I'm giving you. So again, that's like the 4-way to move, is you just press move. As you can see, shift space G. And when you select your object, it gives you only that pivot point that will move your object. Same for this guy here, that is rotate. Then you can rotate your object, do any type of rotations in any. Or, I'm just going to Control C, scale. It will give you the tools to scale. Or the same way we did with G, you can use shortcuts to move. So if you press R for rotate, now you can just rotate your object. You just move like along that little line with the arrows that will show you where to move your object. It's not very precise, but it gives you like an easy rotation. Again, if you want to confirm your movement, you click left click, and then you'll have your object fully rotate. And then again, if you rotate and you're like, oh, I don't want to rotate it here, you press right click and it will cancel your movement. So that's something that is good to know. Left click, confirm, right click, cancel. And then same for scale. You use the shortcut S for scale. You press your model and then it will like scale uniformly your object. Now we can do the same for both rotate and scale, like the moving within the same axis. If I press X, now it's only going to scale on the X axis. If I press Y, it's only going to scale on Y. And if I press Z, it's only going to scale on Z. So you can use this as a quick, like, I don't know, I'm making a building. Boom, you have your building. And then, as you can see, it's not in the grid. So you're like, oh, I need to move it up a little bit because it's not in, like, it's under my grid and not on top of the grid, which will be kind of like your floor. Then you can just grab it, press Z, and you can bring it up. And now your cube looks like a building. So that's kind of like the basic movement for Blender. A lot of options. You can like play around and feel like see which one it feels more comfortable. As I say, I really like this one because it gives you pretty much everything. You know, like I can now scale, move, and rotate my object inside the same tool. To get this tool, you can get it here on transform, or you can hit shift spacebar and it's going to bring this menu that you can see. It has all your tools. It's kind of like the shortcut. You can also use that. It has your move, your rotate, your scale, your transform, and like another couple of stuff that are useful. So yeah, if I press shift space and I hit transform and I hit my cube with left click, now I have that tool back. So I can move it. Next thing I want to show you is Blender has something interesting that I haven't seen in any other program, that is object mode and edit mode. I'm going to show you that in a second. If you come to this menu here, you have your object mode, or if you open it, you have like several things over here. You have an edit, a scope, vertex paint, white paint, texture painting. You're usually like in modeling, you're probably only going to hang out in object, edit, and texture. Oh, and a scope mode, which are like the most commons, like the ones we will be using on the workshop. There is a shortcut for that because there is a shortcut for everything. So there is two. I don't know how to call this key on my keyboard, which is like, you know, on top of your tab, there is like this, I don't know if you can see it on the side. There is kind of like an accent, but on the other way, it's kind of like the French one. It can bring this menu that has like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's another menu. Is but that's why you have your shortcuts in thing, because sometimes I confuse things. Control tab, that's what I was looking for. You hit control, you hit tab, and then this is the menu I was talking about. You can see that it has like a pie menu with your object mode, scope mode, edit mode, texture painting, all of that. And then you can just like drag your mouse and click it, and it will bring you to the menu that you need. And that's super useful. Just give me 1 second. I think, can you guys hear me? I think my earphones disconnect for a second.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, oh good, yeah, it was me. Something happened and they disconnect. But as you can see, again, just to go back to what I was saying, Control Tab and it will bring you to the menu. So I'm going to change to object mode, and it brings me to the menu. Or you can just hit tab, and it will bring you between object mode and edit mode. So that's kind of like super easy. And most of the time, you're just going to be doing that when modeling, because you're going to be switching between those two. So as you can see, so I don't know what's happening with my earphones. They keep like connecting, disconnecting. I think they maybe just died. Okay. I think I'm just gonna take them off. Okay, can you guys still hear me if I'm talking like that? It should be, yeah, it should be good. Now I just have you on the speaker, so might be a little bit of feedback, but it should be good. Someone was saying something about like how you buy something or do something? No? Okay. Cool. So again, I'm gonna go back to object mode. When you are in object mode, the only thing you can do is move your object around and select it. You might have more options to do things around, but that's kind of what you do. If you wanna do something in your cube and bring the vertex, edges, and faces that we were talking at the beginning, you will come to, and now my tab is not working. You will come to your edit mode. And then you can see that now you can see like the individual vertex of your model. And then if you select one and you use either these tools, which are kind of like the same that we saw in object mode, which is your move. If you move it, you can edit your object now. So Blender has that option for you know, to keep your movement and your edition like separate. So I think that's cool. It's the first program where I encountered that. Now you have like the, as I say, you have the same tools available here, and you can use the same shortcuts that I gave. So if I was to move this one, I can just press G, and then let's say I press X, and it's gonna move it on X. Or if I press Z, it's gonna move it on Z. Same with all the tools. But the difference now is you're able to manipulate your models, so you can now do more stuff with your cube. Now, you have another important shortcut here is, or menu, is if you press 1 in your like keyboard, you will get vertex mode. If you press 2, you have your edges, and if you press 3, you have your faces. I see Juan has a question.
Yeah, hey Sonia, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know why my.
Oh, I can hear you. Just give me 1 second. Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, awesome. I don't know why my numpad doesn't work like that, because when I try to, every time I go 1, 2, 3 or something like that, every time I go 1, just the camera changes.
I was just gonna mention that Blender has a couple funny things. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not you, it's the program. This is one of those situations where you're like, I don't know why this is not working. If you go to your numpad, it's gonna bring to the orthographic view. So if I press 1, it brings me to the y-axis, aka kind of like the side view of my model. If I press 2, it's gonna start like rotating that model. If I press 3, it brings it to the x-axis, and same. I think it's 6 will rotate your model, and 9, 2. If you bring it to 5, it's perspective view. 4, rotates. So if you're using your numpad, it's gonna be like your orthographic view. So you have to use the 1, 2, and 3 that is on top of your like letters, you know, like the one that is on top of your cube. You have to use that one because it's kind of like 2 shortcuts at the same time. If you don't have a numpad, unfortunately, you don't have this orthographic shortcut, and you will have to use like maybe this menu or another shortcut that I will show you later. But yeah, that's something that Blender has. It's like, because it has so many ways to do something, sometimes they overlap and it can get very confusing. So yeah, once again, sorry?
Okay, cool. Yeah, actually, the numbers on top of the letters do the same. I mean, they just change the.
They do? Okay.
Yeah. I don't
That's
know
weird.
Yeah.
That might be something that you have to like go to Windows, edit, preference, and change the shortcut.
Okay.
But there is a way to change it manually without like using that. That is like this menu over here.
Okay. Yeah.
You see that this guy brings the vertex. This guy will bring your edges. And the third one will bring the faces.
Okay.
So you can completely do that and feel comfortable. It's just like kind of like the extra step of going out of your screen to look for these ones. And then probably later we can find you a way to like change your shortcuts, or like maybe something in your keyboard that is just confusing the program. But it does happen that your numpad is for orthographic and then your regular numbers are for this menu over here. So that's good to know. Then another way, when I got confused at the beginning, to bring the orthographic menu is this guy I just put in the chat. That like little accent to the right, to the right, that will help you bring your high menu for your orthographic view. So if I click it, you see that it brings that menu again. So that might be another way for you to like move in orthographic view. If I click right and let it go, it brings me to the right view, back, or left, that's also useful. But the second you hit your wheel and like try to move, you get out of there. So that's a good way to like maybe see your model in different angles and like something more precise. And that's pretty much how you move inside the program. So I'm gonna go back to object mode. And then I'm gonna show you how to bring a reference into the program. There is several ways. The one I'm gonna show you is just to have like kind of like a side image inside the program. If you see right here that there is a plus sign, now I can like make a second screen. And now I have two screens in my program, which is very useful for a lot of things, because now you can see your model here, and then I'm gonna bring my reference image in this side. If you bring, like, let's say, oh no, I brought a third one by mistake, and I'm like, I don't need it. You just come very close again, and you see when I kind of like drag, I click it, it selects it, and when I drag it, it says join areas. It's gonna like combine them. So if you create too many, that's like a way to like get rid of them. So just to show you again, click on the plus, it selects, and then you join it. And then you have like one screen again. I'm gonna bring it back by clicking. Oh, I clicked the wrong one there. So be careful with that. And then once you know that you're selecting the one you want to duplicate, you duplicate that one. And then I come to this menu over here that is editor type. And it gives me like a bunch of menus that, again, you can explore in your own time. I'm going to bring image editor. This just like to bring an image inside the program. And then I'm going to open and go where I have my image, which is my desktop. Just bring that guy, and boom, I have my image. So I was mentioning, I'm gonna be making like this character to like show you how to move around the program. And I think like you can either do like your own character, or you can like go along with me and do the same one. But this exercise is very good to like move around the program and get very confident with those shortcuts I just show you. because they're tricky, especially because you're clicking a lot of stuff. Just to move, you have to click like, I don't know, if you're using like the movements up and down, you're clicking like 2 to 3 stuff, and it can get very confusing really quick. So if I was gonna model this, I'm gonna start with my cube. Now I'm gonna select it, and then say like, okay, this cube is gonna be my head. So I'm gonna bring it, and then I'm gonna start scaling it. So this is why I love this menu, because like, I'm doing everything within the same tool. The only thing that I cannot do with this tool is like, if I want a uniform scale on my model, like let's say this is kind of like, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. Like this is the side of the head I want, but I think it's too small. I wanna make it bigger. I have to press S, and then I have to scale it. That's kind of like the only downside I see. But if you were to make this from scratch with the other shortcuts, then the movement will be, you have to press G to move it, then you have to press Z to move it up, then you will have to press scale to like scale it, but that will only scale it uniform to all sides. So it will be like, okay, I want to scale it first on X, and then I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, just like around there. And then just gonna press move so we don't have like the gizmo in there. And now, okay, I want to make it a little bit wider. So I have to press scale again, and now I have to press Y and scale it. So it's just different ways to do it. Or as I show you at the beginning, you can use like that snapping tool of like, if you press G and then you move there, and then you can snap it. Let's say I want a little bit lower, then you lower it, and then it's gonna be moving on that, and I don't have to press anything else. But yeah, that's how you will start your modeling. To add a second cube, like now this is my head. Maybe it's a little too small, and then I'm gonna scale it. Okay, that's my head. I'm happy with it. I want to add another cube. There is 2 ways to do it. You can come to add right here, click mesh, and then you can bring a plane, a cube, a circle, a UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, cone, throws. Like you can bring all of this. Add mesh cube. Now I have a cube. Fantastic. Or there is a shortcut called Shift A. That is the add menu. So again, in your viewport, you press Shift A, and then it brings the menu, and then you can select the cube here, and it will appear. So that's an easy way to bring it in your shortcut. Something I want to mention before we keep going forward is that, as you can see right now, this cube is an object inside the program, like an independent object. And you're going to see it here as cube. I can rename this, and now it's going to be my head. If I was going to make another cube again and press Shift A and bring that cube into here, you see that now I have another cube here. And now I'm going to maybe name that body. And that means that I can select those cubes individually and move them individually. Something that happens on Blender is that, let's say I'm going to delete this cube again. You are in your edit mode. Press tab. Let's say I'm in edit mode and I'm doing something on this cube. I'm like editing those faces. You can move your model like this too by moving your faces. And you're like, okay, I'm happy with like how my head looks. Just gonna move it a little bit. I'm gonna add some more character to it. Okay, now I want to add that body cube, and then you're like, okay, good, I'm good, and you press Shift A, add the cube, and start working with it. to move it, I have to select it all because I'm not moving the cube, I'm moving the faces. That's the difference between edit mode and object mode. One of them is that you're moving a specific things. In edit mode, you can only move the faces, the vertex, or the edges. Only that. You cannot move your object. So if you want to move your object, then you have to go to object mode, and then you move your object individually. But we have a problem here, and is that my objects are combined, and you're like, oh, what happened here? Why? What this happened? And is that if you create an object in edit mode, it's gonna like combine it. It's gonna make it's gonna assume that this cube that you're making is part of the head, and it's gonna be two objects. So it's dangerous, and it can get messy very quickly because you lose control on this cube. Now, if you wanna, again, if you go to object mode and you're like, I wanna move my cube, now these two are connected, and you're like, I don't want that. So unfortunately, you have to go back to edit mode, select all your object, like all your faces, and then separate the object. I think it's P by loose, separate is P, and then by loose parts, and then you can make the object. And you can see that now here is head and head 001. It kind of creates like a different object. But I think you can see that the pivot point for this object is still linked to the main object. So as I said, it can get messy very quick. And then if you're working with in a 3D scene, you're going to be working with multiple objects. You don't want that. So you have to make sure that, I'm just going to delete it. I was going to Control-C it all the way, but that seems too long. I'm going to hit delete, and then it's going to bring this menu. I'm just going to press delete by faces, and it deletes the entire cube. So you need to make sure that when you're creating an object, you do the Shift-A or the Add object in the object mode. So they are separate objects. That's like one of the most important things on Blender, is that you create that cube and you can see it's a second cube, and you can independently treat it. And then you can see that the pivot point is attached to this cube and is on the center. So it will make your modeling easy. That's kind of like the one thing I really wanted to get into today, other than the movement, because that's your new mistake that you're gonna make at some point. So every time you make an object, just double check, are you in object mode or are you in edit mode? Now I wanna make the body of this candy princess. So I'm gonna press Shift spacebar, and it's gonna bring this menu again, and I'm gonna hit transform, and it brings that menu again, and I can easily model. Oops, see, this is my mouse like going crazy. So again, if that happens to you, you can use the control wheel, but it happens sometimes that my mouse goes crazy, and I'm here and I'm like, oh, where's my model? And instead of looking for it, because sometimes you go very far and you have many pieces, you can select your object. I'm going to select my head here, and then you press period in your numpad, and it brings you close to it, very close, but it will let you go back to the object. And if it's not like a big object, it won't look like that. I just thought that would be cool to mention. And then let me see. Okay, so we have gone through how to rotate, how to zoom, how to pan, how to move your object, and your edit mode. So this is pretty much how you move in Blender, and then that's kind of like the basics of it. Another one I want to show you is select multiple, Shift plus left click. If you say, I want to move these two together, because I want to move this one here, and then this one too, and I don't want to do that individually, you can select your head, and then press shift and then select the body, and it's gonna like kind of like do an average on where the middle of the two objects is, and then you can move them together. So that's very easy. And then you're like, okay, my character maybe, now that I'm looking at, she looks like too tall, like a spaghetti legs. I'm gonna bring it a little bit down. And now I'm doing that with both objects at the same time. And then if you were like, I mean, my character is all cubes. I don't wanna go Shift A, mesh cube all the time, 'cause she's cubes. You can duplicate your objects. Shift D will duplicate, and you can see that it will do that. So you have to like kind of like before you left click and commit to that model or like to that duplicate, you have to like, you can move it. So I'm gonna do that again. Shift D. If you want it in the same place, I want to say like I want it exactly where it is. I don't want to move it. You just press left click and it's gonna be there. It doesn't look like, but if I click here and then I move it down, there it is. But you can do, again, all the movement shortcuts that I showed you before. Shift D, and then I'm going to press G, and I'm going to press C, and then I can move them on the C axis, or I can move it on the X, whoop, or I can move it on the Y, maybe to do the arm. And then once you're like, okay, I'm committed to this movement, you just left click and it will create an object. You can see here that now it changed your names because you have now cube 001 and cube 002. So again, it's one of those things that you have to consider when you're working, is that if you have 70 cubes, when you're like, I need to work on a specific part, it's going to get very messy very quick because you're going to have a lot of parts. So you have to get into the habit of like, okay, this is my head, this is my body, and then even if I'm duplicating the body, Shift D, and I'm duplicating the body to make like the little shorts. Then I'm gonna press G, then I'm gonna press C. I'm gonna bring it a little bit down, and then I'm gonna scale it. That looks like good enough to make the legs. Yeah, and then I'm gonna move it and put it like on the leg. Cool, I'm happy with that. That's like the little shorts that she has. But again, because I duplicate the object, you can see that it's body and body 001. So I have to make sure that I come back here and rename this. I'm gonna put short on, oh, sorry, I have caps on. So I have short underscore right, because it's gonna be the right leg. Or no, sorry, I'm dyslexic. So it's gonna be the left leg. So L. Because again, if I duplicate this to make the other one, so Shift D and then G, and then this one, I'm going to move it on the Y axis, boom, and it's here. Now I have to rename it. And it's going to be short R. And then now you have a body with like a cute pair of shorts. Another way to name your objects is like, let's say you are making a duplicate of this. Is what you have the object selected, you press F2 and you say that it says object name. And then you can say like, I don't know, arm. And now that changes your arm name immediately here. So again, multiple ways to do the same thing. You can do it in the viewport by pressing F2, or you can, and then you can do it multiple times. It doesn't mean like if you don't do it the first time that you're gonna lose it forever. If you press it here, then I can change this one or this one. If this might be important, if you don't have the F2 available, I think that's why it's an add-on. that's something that happens a lot with Blender, is that as a program, it has like a good community that keeps doing like add-ons, meaning like it's extra tools, extra stuff that you can use in the program for specific stuff, especially for modeling. You know, you have like an UV toolkit that is very similar to Maya. Did someone make that, and you can add that to Blender, or like some movement tools that make your life easier. But if you're looking at a tutorial and you're like, I don't have that, like, or why my program doesn't have that, it's because they probably have an add-on. So I just want to quickly show you how to do that, because it's going to save you a lot of time in the future. And is you come to Edit, Preferences, and over here in this menu, it's like kind of like all your preference for the program. You can change everything you want here. Before, when we were saying like, oh, maybe Juan has to change the shortcuts for like orthographic view and make sure that 1, 2, and 3 is vertex, edge, and face mode, you will do it here. You will just have to find where the shortcut is and assign those keys. But all your shortcuts are in key map, and that's where you like edit those ones, and you can make your own shortcuts. And then add-ons would be where you find your add-ons. So as you can see, here's F2. By default, your program will have it disabled. So that means that when I press F2, nothing happens. So now that I show you that, I want to show you how to activate it. That is like you will, I think, I'm going to say preference to like not have it. You see that if I press F, oh, it worked. Okay, maybe because I install it, it still thinks that it's there. But in case you don't have it, you will have to come to Edit, Preference, Add-ons, go to Search, and then look for your add-on, which will be F2, and then make sure it's installed. And then you will have to, oh, it's because I have autosave preference. Okay. If you find that someone in the community has like a nice add-on, they're probably going to be in Get Extensions. It's going to ask, the first time you go in there, it's going to ask you for permission to go online. You say yes, which means that it will connect to internet, like to the Blender forum, to see all the add-ons. So as you can see, these are all the add-ons that I have installed already from the community. And these are all the add-ons that I could possibly install. So that's kind of something you should know about Blender, because it can get tricky that if you're watching a tutorial or you're trying to follow something and you're like, I don't have that tool, maybe try to see if it's an add-on and if you can find it there. Sometimes it happens that they're constantly changing the program. It's like a double-edged sword that I find with Blender is that, you know, we have like 4.1 just a couple months ago, and now we're in 4.3. And between those two, like even they still 4 point something, between those 3 versions, they change stuff. So sometimes you can't find a tool, sometimes they get rid of them, sometimes they add more, they simplify things. So they're constantly changing the layout of the program, and especially in this area right here, where your like property menu is, they tend to change things. So when you're following a tutorial, you might be like, I don't find what you're doing, and it's not an add-on. It could be that. And that's good to keep in mind, because then you, instead of trying to look for an add-on, you have to go and be like, okay, this person did this in this version of Blender. How can I do this in this version of Blender? And you kind of have to get into the process of finding that, which can be a little bit annoying. So that's why I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Going back to our exercise, now that I make the shorts, I'm not gonna do the arm immediately. I'm gonna keep doing the legs, because from this cube over here, I can do the legs. I can do a little bit of her leg, and I can do her like boots, ties, whatever she has in the Funko Pop. So again, I can Shift D, C, bring it down. Something I want to mention is like you see there is some black weird clipping through that. That means your model is clipping because this cube and this cube are exactly the same. When they are overlapping, the program doesn't know which cube is in front of which one. So it's trying to show you both cubes at the same time. And so if you ever see these and you're like, oh, what's going on? It looks ugly. It's because of that. So you can just like, if you move it, you don't have that problem anymore. But you're like, well, I need my leg to be here, you might have to scale it a little bit, just a tiny bit down. I'm gonna do like a tiny bit of scale. Just see it's not a lot, but it gets rid of that because now this cube is in front of this cube and the program knows that. So it's not gonna try to like render both faces at the same time. So if you ever see that black thing, don't freak out. It just means you have two objects facing at the same time. Then again, I have to rename this guy. So I'm going to press F2, and then I'm going to be leg. And then I'm going to keep doing that. Shift D, bring down. I still need it down, so I'm still going to press G and press C, and it's going to bring it down. And then I'm going to have the same problem again. So now I'm just going to scale it a little bit up because it's like a sock. So it will be on top of your leg. So if you think it makes sense that the leg is a little bit thinner than, maybe it's too thick, but it will make sense in like real life that the shorts are on top of the leg and then the socks are on top of the leg and they're like a little bit wider. So again, I can just like manipulate. That's why I like this guy because he's a little bit more precise. And then boom, I have her leg and you're like, okay, I like the placement of this. It kind of has like the same distance between the shorts, the leg, and the socks. So if I scale it, it's going to do this. And you're like, I don't want that. So that's when you go to edit mode. Because then if I click tab, and I deselect my object by tapping, like left click on the viewport, now I can either move only the face, and I can just drag the face and make the leg longer, or you can move it with your vertex, and you can select all your vertex, and you can move your leg. So instead of scaling all the object, you're just dragging a little bit of the leg. Now, problems that you may have when you're here, if I'm looking at only this and I select my vertex by clicking left and dragging, if you're having problems with your selection tool, it's over here. Sometimes it switches from selection box to selected circle or lasso, which are kind of like the same as Photoshop. I personally like the select box, so I usually put it here. But if it's circle, you can't select multiple things. It kind of only selects what's on the circle. So it's a little bit like inconvenient for like what we're doing right now. So I'm gonna switch it to select box. If I select the vertex, I'm only selecting the front. So when I'm moving them, so if I press G and I press C, it looks like I move everything, but it's only moving one side. And that's something you have to be very careful because then you have to like if you do it right now, not a big deal. I press Ctrl C and I fix it. But what if you did like 100 things and you didn't notice that? And you're like, oh, now I have to go back and fix it or redo the object or like try to find something how to fix it, So you have to be careful when you're moving vertex and making sure that you're moving the ones you want sometimes it happens that you select like these two and maybe like the one on top by mistake. Like maybe if you did this and then you have all of them and you're moving, you might create some problems. So the easy way to see all of it and select all of them at the same time is this guy over here. It's called Toggle X-Ray. And you can see that it lets you see through your model. And it's a very useful tool because now you can see like transparency. So when you select your vertex, you're selecting all of them. And then when you move them, you're moving all of them. So if I do G and C, I'm moving all of them. You can bring it from here. This is where he is. Or I think is LC. Yeah, it's LC is the shortcut for that. It will bring that. And that is how you can select things that are not facing the camera, is activating a transparency. And it will let you to add things very easily. Perfect. So we have a leg, we have the shorts, we have the leg, and we have the boots. So I'm going to go back to object mode. And then I'm going to make her shoe by, I'm going to rename this super quick. And I'm going to put boot. And then left. And then that's kind of like the workflow you want. It's like make sure you're naming everything and that, yeah, everything has a name and a place. And you work like in an organized way. So when you create your shoe, because again, it's cube still. So, and I will Shift D, which is duplicate, is like the most useful tool that you're gonna use other than you're moving around. So that's kind of like what this exercise makes it easy for you to get used to use those two. I didn't. Okay, if I do Shift D, oh, look at that. Move, click, Shift D. I was hitting Control D. Sorry about that. Shift D. And then I'm going to put G. And then I'm going to move it on D. I think this is the X axis. Perfect. I'm going to kind of like put it in front. Because right now, instead of scaling like this, because, oh, sorry, it's scaling like this or like scaling up and down like this, like we were saying, I'm going to move just the faces. So I'm going to go back to edit mode. I'm going to go to face mode by hitting 3. I'm going to hit my face, and then I'm going to hit G, and then I'm going to hit C, and then I can grab it down. And just like that, I have a full leg, you know? And then I got to make sure to go back to object mode. Oh, no, it is separate objects. That's good. For a second, I thought I created inside my other object, but you can see that it's put L. So I'm just going to push shoe or something like that, just to keep it organized, and boom. Just like that, we're like halfway our model. You have a head, you have a body, you have a leg with like a shorts leg and shoe. And yeah, like in your own time, you can keep doing this and continue. I'm gonna, just because purpose of time, I want to show you how you will change the colors or how you will make a material in Blender, just so when you are done with your character, you can like change the colors. So I'm gonna select my head, and then I'm gonna go to this menu, and I'm gonna look for the tab option of material. And you see it has nothing, so I'm gonna hit new. And that's just gonna create like a basic material. Right now, you don't need to care about anything other than the base color. Because if you click base color, it's gonna bring you the wheel, and it's gonna bring you your eyedropper. So if I hit my eyedropper and I hit her face, now it's gonna change to this color. And you're like, wait a second, it didn't do anything on my screen, but I add my material. I'm gonna quickly rename my material because that's what we do. We name things and I'm gonna put face. And you're like, I can see it. It's because you are right now, right here on viewport shading, which is kind of like the most basic way to see your viewport. Just for like render time, not render time, but like, you know, like you don't want to kill your computer. If you're doing like a preview of your render, then you do that, but you kind of want to work on gray scale, and you don't want to be projecting your textures all the time. So, you know, like to save power, like if your graphic card is not that good, you don't want to push it too much, because if you do, then the program starts getting laggy and then it might crash. So if you want to avoid that, you kind of want to work on this viewport shading, which is kind of like a solid base color. Everything is going to look gray. If I go to the first one, which is this one, it's going to show me like full-on transparency. This is just a way to see all your objects. It's kind of useful to see, like, if I don't know, if by mistake I create a cube. Let's go back to solid. By mistake, let's say I click Shift D when I was doing the head, and I click again left, and I thought I didn't do it, blah blah blah, and I move on. When I'm checking things, I can check here, and you see that. Oh, don't go far away. You can see the lines look a little bit thicker. And you're like, why do they look thicker than like my lines here? And it's because there is an object inside. And then you can see that there is like two overlapping objects there. It's very subtle. It works more like if, let's say, if this object was like a scale. Now you can see that this cube is inside your object. So that's useful for like when you're working large scale. Like imagine if you're making a spaceship and like your chairs are inside your spaceship and you want to place them inside. This is a good way to move around the program and be able to see everything. So I'm going to delete the cube. And then if we go to this one over here, this is method to display. Now you can see the pink. This one is kind of like a preview render of your program. It kind of has like a fake light that it will show you how the objects are interacting. You know, because if I move my light, which is this one, it doesn't really do anything. And it's because right now I'm looking this light over here. Remember when I said that the program came with kind of like its own real-time life that interacts with the models? It does it on this one, a preview render. So it's good to like, now you bring your textures to the program and you want to work with the textures, you can do it on this menu and it will kind of see how it interacts with light and how things are looking and how your textures are looking. And then if you want to see a preview render, then you use this one over here. And then you can see that this is how my render object would look right now. And you can see that this light over here, that is like the default light of Blender, is only hitting the back. So I'm only getting the light right here. And if I move it, then the light starts interacting with the object. And if I put it here, you know, again, if I move it, it moves with the object. Now, like I have it kind of like facing in the front. So again, this is like a good way to see how things are looking before you render. It's not accurate, but it's very useful. And it's not too heavy in your computer, but if, again, it depends on your graphic cards, it depends on your RAM. So it's one of those, like, you might want to save that to see like a quick preview. And then I'm gonna go back to solid. And I want to show you something super quick because we're almost running out of time. If you hit 0, you're in this weird camera view. And you're like, what is this? Well, 0 is this camera over here. You know, it comes with the program, you're working on it. And And if I was to render right now my little model, it's gonna render that view that we just saw. The shortcut to render is F12, and it's gonna open a render view, and you just can see that, what the heck, it's just a lag, or like a little bit of a lag. I'm gonna close it, and it's like, that's not what I'm looking at my viewport. It's because you only render always from a camera. So you can look at your camera here by pressing 0. You can get in and out, and then you can like modify your camera. Another way, super quick, to get your render, if you're like, I can't remember F12, is you go to render and you click render image, and then you have your shortcut here. So eventually you will like remember it. But again, if brings my render is the same lag. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just move the camera forward because I realized I was working on the wrong axis. And like, you can see that it's looking at the back of my leg, and the camera moves the same way. So right now I'm in the move G selection, and I'm just gonna like bring in my camera over here. And then if I want to rotate, I'm just gonna come to rotate. And that should be better. I can double check by pressing 0. And you see like, okay, that's not bad, but that's not great. Another way you can do this that is like more comfortable is that if you press N for in your viewport, it's gonna bring this little menu. I don't know why it's N, it doesn't make sense. And for properties and for like options, I don't know. But you can find it here. And if you press N again, it's gonna go away. So if you press N and you press view, right here, you can say camera to view. And now you see that it has like these little lines. It's because now you link your camera to your viewport movement. So I can do Control to zoom. I can do G, X to like get far to, you know, because it's like moving in that X axis. Or if I press Y, it's gonna move on this one. And like now I move my camera in an easy way. Because if you don't have this activate and you try to move with your wheel, it's just gonna get out of the camera. And that means that if you wanna move it, you have to move it from like the menu option, like by doing manually this. So it can get, you know, you wanna like sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the word, but you wanna see what you're doing, like in real time, because it makes it easier for you. So again, if you press 0 and then you hit, I'm gonna do all of that again. If you press 0 and then you press N, usually it's gonna be in items, transform. So you have to go to view. If you don't see this, like for example, you open it and it's like that, you have to open view log, camera to view, and now it's linked and you can move it. And that's just me pressing wheel and moving like I was moving on the viewport normally. And now I'm gonna press N again to get rid of my menu, and I'm gonna press F12 to render. Boom! I can see a little bit from my model, and you're getting there. So you can add materials and colors, and you can add, you know, finish your character. I'm just gonna get out of here, and then yeah, you could add anything, and then technically once you are, I'm gonna render again, and you're like, I'm happy with my image, and then you can come to image and save, and then I'm gonna save it on desktop. I'm gonna say this is a test render. Oh my god, I don't know how to spell. Okay, test render, save image. It's safe. I can close this, and then if I go to my desktop and I look, it's right here, and it saves like a P. Oh, it opened on my other screen. Right here. Now I have it saved on my desktop as a PNG file. So it's a great way to preview your work very quick. And just like that, if you're doing that, technically you have your first 3D character model and your first 3D render that you ever done. And that's kind of like the most easy way that I find to learn to navigate the program. Of course, like you can make crazy things. This is just kind of like to start. But I would say put the time of like maybe making a fun character that you like just for you. Of course, like it won't be like a portfolio piece that you can show off, but it will let you learn all the basics of the program. And then once you're done and you kind of have like an idea of what you're doing, then you can move on into more advanced stuff. And that's pretty much it for today's lesson. Of course, it's not like you have homework because it's like a one class, but I would really encourage you to like finish like a character like this, or try to do like a small project where you're moving around the program, just to feel confident. And then once you're doing that, you can look for other tutorials, or like you could sign up for like the full workshop, and then we would do more complex props. I don't know, before we go, if anyone has a question or something that they were like, I don't know how you did that. Can you repeat it? I'm more than happy to do it. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Just to say thank you, Sonia, for your class.
Thank you. I mean, thank you so much for everyone for coming today. I hope you learned something and you had fun. And then if you're interested in the workshop, the school will be posting more of the information in their social media and like their website. So if you would like to sign up for that and like stay with me and do like a 10-week course, then we can do that. And then we will like go really in depth on how to do multiple things on Blender. And then ideally by the end of that course, you will have like 1 to 2 props that you could add to your portfolio. And then you will be in a good place to independently know where to go after. If you're like, okay, now that I have the fundamentals and I want to make this, now you have all the tools and you can move on from that. And then you will have like my assistance in anything that happens within the program. And then, yeah, that being said, thank you so much for attending. And then, yeah, I will let you all go.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day. Well, nighttime.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.